2000, an uprising began in Palestine. Like most Americans, Alison Weir, the editor of a small-town newspaper in California, knew very little about the conflict, other than what she had gleaned from the evening news or newspaper headlines. Neither a Muslim nor a Jew, she nevertheless became more curious about the topic of the Palestinian uprising. And as she researched it, she became increasingly suspicious that the American media were not telling us the whole story. Months later, she traveled to the occupied territories as an independent journalist to find out for herself what the U.S. media seemed to be omitting. 3 months after returning from Palestine, Alison Weir quit her job and founded If Americans Knew, an organization dedicated to quantifying the ways in which the American media was misinforming the public about the conflict.
We decided to really look into the news coverage of Israel and Palestine analytically and statistically to really understand what is going on. And we decided to choose clear, objective categories that would be as immune as possible to subjective interpretation. And we decided to look at how deaths were being covered by our media. Now, the important thing is that we looked at how deaths were being covered among both populations, Israelis and Palestinians. We specifically studied the New York Times and the 3 major networks. We looked at ABC, CBS, and NBC, their evening primetime news shows. Now, to do this study, the first job was a very sad job, to discover how many people had been killed during those 2 years, how many Israelis and how many Palestinians. And to learn that fact, we went to an Israeli human rights organization, B'Tselem, which is very respected and quite careful in its gathering of data. Palestinians were being killed last year by a rate of 8-to-1 over Israeli deaths. Now, keeping those numbers in line, we then looked at what the New York Times had reported and what these major networks had reported. For example, we found that ABC had covered Israeli deaths at a rate 3.1 times greater than Palestinian deaths. We discovered that CBS had covered Israeli deaths at a rate almost 4 times greater, 3.8-to-1. We discovered that NBC covered Israeli deaths at a rate 4 times greater than Palestinian deaths. Mainly what we discovered was omission. And of course, we all know the most effective lying is lying through omission, because no one even knows what's missing. Perhaps the most significant omission in our media's reporting is our own connection to this conflict. The amount of American tax money to Israel is approximately $15 million per day. We give them more than we give to all of sub-Saharan Africa put together. Americans can and should draw their own conclusions, but they cannot draw informed conclusions without having full, unbiased information. And we're not getting that yet. We won't get that until we all demand it.